So buying used PC parts is a great way to save money and get more bang for your buck when building a PC. However, there are some parts that are more risky to buy used than others. This is the Hardware Hub, and today I'll be showing you guys a guide to buying used PC parts. If you've been looking for PC parts online, you've probably seen used PC components on places like eBay, Craigslist, and Reddit. Now there are some parts that I would absolutely not recommend that you buy used. The first one is the hard drive. Now these are all mechanical, so they will eventually fail from wear and tear. A used hard drive is going to be closer to failure, and it's going to put any data that they have on it at a higher risk of being lost. Now used hard drives are usually around half the price of the equivalent new one. Now this might seem like a good deal, but new hard drives are pretty cheap as is, so I'd say it's definitely worth it to spend a little bit of extra money to have the peace of mind of knowing that your drive's not going to fail in, 1 or 2 years. Now the other thing that I would place in the do not buy list is the power supply. Now often the price savings are minimal at best because shipping a power supply is pretty expensive because it's pretty bulky and heavy. Now of course a used power supply has a higher chance of failure, and when a power supply fails it can often kill other PC components as well, so it's probably not worth it. It's probably better to buy a new one and know you're not going to have to worry about your power supply failing and then having to buy not only a new power supply but maybe even a new graphics card and motherboard and things like that. And PSUs can last a long time. If you can find one that's only like 1 or 2 years old and it is pretty highly rated, like an 80+ gold rating, and it is local, then something like that would be, not a bad deal. But I personally think for the vast majority of people, buying a new power supply is definitely worth it for the peace of mind. Now in the next group of components, these are components that I would buy used as long as you do the research and make sure there's not any major issues with them. The first one is the motherboard. Now motherboards usually begin dying before CPUs do, so this means that the pricing of older motherboards usually goes up. So while you can find cheap CPUs like Xeons for maybe $10-15 that are like 4 cores and 8 threads, the motherboards that go with them might be like $70-80, which might undermine the point of buying such a budget CPU. Another thing you have to look out for on used motherboards is failing parts. Now motherboards are pretty fragile compared to other PC components, so oftentimes they might have, failing RAM slots, maybe broken SATA ports, that sort of thing. And when you're buying a used motherboard, make sure to check the seller's listing or ask the seller just to double check that there's not any important features that are broken on the motherboard. But assuming that you get the motherboard for a decent price and it has all the features they need working on it, buying a used motherboard is definitely not a bad option. Now the other component is a graphics card. Now buying a used GPU is a safe way to get more bang for your buck in your gaming PC. However, there are some things that you want to look out for and avoid. The first thing is overclocking. Now overclocking in general is usually not bad and it's not going to do too much damage to your GPU. However, overvolting is usually going to be really harmful to your GPU, so you want to avoid graphics cards that have been overvolted for an extended period of time because overvolting is really going to shorten your GPU's lifespan. The other thing you want to avoid is mining GPUs. Now when a GPU mines, it's pegged at 100%, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and this is a pretty unhealthy amount of load. Comparatively, a person who uses a GPU for gaming is going to be using it for maybe a couple hours a day, which is not the same level of usage, and it's not going to be pegged at 100% when it is gaming. So mining definitely does do some damage to your GPU, and you should avoid it if you can. Now I personally have only bought used GPUs since I started PC building, and I haven't had any issues and will recommend it to any new PC builder. Now the next thing in the middle tier is SSDs. Now SSDs do rarely fail. Most that will fail prematurely usually fail in the first few weeks of usage. Now these do have a set lifespan of a certain number of read and writes. However, the number is usually incredibly high, like 100 terabytes, and most regular users aren't going to reach that limit at least before the drive itself becomes obsolete. Before buying an SSD, you should ask for its crystal disk information. This will show you how much data has been read and written, and will also tell you how much of the SSD's life is left. For the most part, as long as the SSD is like less than 5 years old and not from a workstation, you should be fine buying a used SSD. Now these last few components really don't have any drawbacks when buying used. The first thing is a case. And the only thing I'd worry about with a case is shipping. If you can find a case locally, I'd highly recommend you buy it, simply because selling a case is usually pretty difficult, and if you do find a seller who's selling a case, you'll probably be the only buyer and you could probably talk him down to a very good price. But besides that, cases themselves, of course, as they get used, they might get scuffed, dented, and that sort of thing, but it's not going to really affect your PC gaming experience. So yeah, go ahead and buy a used case if you can find a good deal. Now the other thing is air CPU coolers. Now air CPU coolers are really just a piece of metal, which is a heatsink and a fan attached to it, so there's not really that much that could go wrong. If the fan does fail on the CPU cooler, you can go ahead and buy a new fan and attach it onto the CPU cooler itself, and then it'll be good to go. Now with these, if you can find it locally, that is also recommended, simply because once you factor in shipping, a lot of these CPU coolers might end up costing the same as the new one. But if you buy locally, you can skip the shipping cost, and you can probably get a used CPU cooler for around half the price of what it is brand new. And it's really going to be performing the same as a new one, so it's a pretty good deal to buy used. One thing to keep in mind here is that I'm not talking about liquid CPU coolers. Liquid CPU coolers do have a set lifespan, and they will pretty much fail after 8 or 9 years of regular usage, and of course there's a chance for leaks and that sort of thing. That's really not the same level as an air CPU cooler, and I would not recommend that at all. Now the next component is the CPU. Now the CPU, there's only one precaution, which is overclocking. Like the GPU, if somebody was under a heavy overclock on the CPU for a long time, especially if they're overvolting, that can definitely shorten its lifespan and make failure a possibility. The main thing you need to watch out for is overvolting, which puts a lot more strain on the CPU, and buying an overvolted CPU is really not worth the risk. However, assuming that the CPU is not overvolted, it's a pretty good buy to buy a CPU used, simply because they do fail pretty rarely and performance does not degrade over time. Now the last thing is RAM. Now this is flash storage, and similar to an SSD, it does have a limited lifespan, but it does generally last a lot longer. Generally speaking, by the time a RAM kit is about to fail, it's going to probably be obsolete, so I wouldn't really worry about failures for RAM. RAM is one of those things that either works or doesn't, so pretty much the only research you have to do is to make sure that the seller is selling RAM to you that actually works. And besides that, I guess it's just a great way to save money. Now there are other things out there that you can buy used, but these are the main things that most people are concerned with. If you have questions about a specific part, or if you want recommendations for say a used CPU or GPU, leave a comment down below and I'll answer you down there. Now of course down below I'll have a link to Reddit Hardware Swap, eBay, and Craigslist, so you can of course go straight to them and begin looking for your next used PC parts. But yeah guys, that's all for today. If you liked the video, please be sure to hit the like button. If you didn't like it, please dislike this video and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you guys in the next one.